The truth about Eric Allen Bell. Eric Allen Bell is a right-wing conspiracy theorist, claiming that Islam taking over is the biggest threat that the world faces today. Okay, the first thing you ask yourself here is that true? Or is that what he wants you to believe? After working with Michael Moore and George Soros, Bell claims to have had an epiphany where he realized that Islamophobia was fake and that he needed to do the right thing and let the world know about it. And Bell has gotten a lot of mileage out of this story, in terms of television interviews, radio programs, and speaking engagements. But this isn't the true story about Eric Allen Bell. So, what is? Let's start at the beginning. Eric Allen Bell was put up for adoption at birth. His mother was a teenager at the time who belonged to a very prominent family. In his 30s, then Eric Allen Edborg hired a private detective and found his family of origin. He learned that his birth mother tragically committed suicide, soon after having to give him up. He met certain members of his biological family who are part of a company you may have heard of, Bell Helicopter, part of the military-industrial complex. Other family members sit on the boards of similar companies and have had huge defense contracts. Can you see where this is going? After years of struggling in show business and even experiencing a certain level of success, one of the patriarchs of his new biological family recognized his potential value as something of a propaganda minister, especially once it was made known how valuable he had become to Michael Moore and the organizations that support his spin control factory. Bell knows about media, mind control, and manipulation of the masses. One of his former assistants claims his library is filled with books on NLP, conversational hypnosis, propaganda, and engineering public opinion. Contrary to the popular narrative, it was in fact certain members of the Bell family, highly placed within the military-industrial complex, who persuaded Bell to switch sides, renounce his left-wing alliances, and convince a rather large audience that in fact America needed to prepare for war against the oil-rich Islamic world. He was and is the perfect man to cast for that job. But wait, there's more. Bell also created and hosted a new age social network called Global One TV. He had demonstrated that people will follow him, whether it's about politics or about religion. Millions of people visited that site before he took it down. He also, at the time, had long hair and a goatee and claimed not to belong to any political party. He had all of the right credentials to spread propaganda, with nearly everyone convinced that he believes all the things he is saying. After all, he had been an advisor for Occupy Wall Street, and there's even an old YouTube video where someone called Dr. Goodall introduces him as a spiritual teacher. There are still several unknowns here. First of all, how was he convinced to switch sides? Was it just for the money? Or was he really convinced, but chose to create a false narrative concerning his conversion story to mask his close ties with the military-industrial complex? In 2012, Bell had written articles for Robert Spencer's site, called Jihad Watch, and for Pamela Geller's site, called Atlas Shrugs. A source whom I trust tells me that both Geller and Spencer distanced themselves from Bell, quickly and at the same time, when it came to their attention that Bell was in fact a CIA operative. If that information got out and was talked about, it could hurt their credibility, so they deleted every article that Bell wrote for them. Another source of mine says that Alex Jones had reached out to them to bolster fear about Islam, but backed away after his own sources expressed concern about Bell being too aligned with the Illuminati. Another interesting detail: when Bell found members of his original biological family, he learned that he was part Jewish. In order to maintain credibility as a sincere and honest member of the alt-right and the counter-jihad network, Bell publicly criticized Jews in some of the articles on his personal website, which he then posted all over Facebook and Twitter. He also criticized Israel. Again, this is all smoke and mirrors, so that no one would even think for a second that Eric Allen Bell is a Zionist with close ties to the military-industrial complex and on the payroll of the CIA. Why does the CIA need someone like Bell? I think by now the reasons are obvious why he is the right guy to cast in the role he is playing. But for what purpose? The answer is simple. To use the phrase my personal hero Noam Chomsky says, to manufacture consent. The role of Eric Allen Bell is to help manufacture consent for war in the Middle East. For those reading this in the middle of 2017, you will see that it won't be long before Bell publishes his first book and elevates his social profile. But for the past 5 years, he has essentially been training, finding his audience, finding his voice, making alliances, purposely making enemies publicly with the very people whom he is aligned with privately. Frank Gaffney, David Horowitz, Ezra Levant, to name a few. When it comes time to publish and promote his first book, the narrative will have 5 or 6 years of seemingly credible history behind it. This is his incubation period. But what follows, you will see, is something far more sinister. Finally, my personal opinion. I think that Eric Allen Bell believes most of what he is saying about Islam. He is a true believer. I know for a fact that he was already affluent before he was approached by anyone offering him money to do what he now does. So, to say he sold out would not be entirely accurate. But that does not mean he is not out for power, which if he was mentored by members of the power elite, especially Illuminati, he knows that power is more valuable than money. Right now, he has money, and soon he will have power. People like Mark Dice and Alex Jones produce fear-based propaganda because it makes them money. Eric Allen Bell, on the other hand, is a different kind of animal altogether. He is clearly thinking long-term. He believes that the West must conquer the oil-rich Islamic world. He's not money-hungry or bloodthirsty. He believes, or has been made to believe, that what he is doing is right for America, and the right thing for Western civilization. And propaganda ministers of this variety, history has shown, always turn out to be the most lethal and do the most damage. If enough doubt is raised in the future about Bell having no alliances with the government, Bell will engineer a very public show of being persecuted by the IRS, thus removing any public doubt and dispelling all claims that he works with the CIA. How will you know if everything I am saying here is true? Simple. Watch. Watch Eric Allen Bell and see what he does over the next year and years to follow. Notice he doesn't ask for money. Notice he promotes ideas more than he promotes himself. Now, watch as all of that will probably change. This is a man who understands the fine art of creating a cult of personality. And I believe this is going to be his next move. I believe he will claim to have figured out he was wrong about Israel and use his influence to get members of the alt-right on board with supporting Israel. Final thoughts. Bell had once partnered with a billionaire hedge fund manager to finance several media projects. He lived, all expenses paid, in the presidential suite at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, then later lived at the prestigious Chateau Marmont Hotel, giving him direct access to the movers and shakers in the entertainment industry. Nearly all his travels to New York were on private jets. Anyone close to him can validate that he often takes a limousine rather than drive himself. Bell has lived in luxury homes in Beverly Hills, Hollywood Hills, Lake Tahoe, Malibu, and has lived in numerous upscale hotels in New York and LA. My point? I believe this is a man who cannot be bought. He had to be persuaded. Someone saw the potential here. Once persuaded, he spent the past several years being groomed for a much larger assignment. Time creates credibility. He has earned the credibility with the alt-right and the counter-jihad. Even those who are offended by his criticisms of Judaism, Christianity, and the Republican Party, they all seem to believe he is authentic. Mission accomplished. His next move will be to rise to the level of, let's say, Andrew Breitbart. Or worse, and to manufacture consent for war. Few people will read or hear or even believe what I am saying here. And Eric Allen Bell will get away with it. All of it. Remember, he was a well-paid screenwriter. He knows about character development and how and when to place foreshadowing in a story to create a later climax or plot twist. And therefore, what I'm saying here, he would easily persuade most of his followers not to believe by pointing to his articles and interviews after 2011, which tell a much different story. It is a story that they want to believe and that they will believe. All we can do, for those of us who are woke and are part of the resistance, is to stay woke and keep speaking truth to power. Remember, there are more of us than there are of them. Consider what Noam Chomsky said about the restless many and the powerful few. Eventually, we shall overcome.